That's interesting.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Kamla Show. We bring you interviews and conversations with technologists, entrepreneurs, filmmakers, and other newsmakers from in and around the San Francisco Bay Area. We continue with our theme of Americans in India, and today we have a local Bay Area resident, Karen Vasudev, who has been married to someone from India for 52 years.
Yes, 52 years.
Okay, and now you live in the Bay Area.
Yes, we live in the Bay Area. We've been in the Bay Area for almost 30 years now.
Okay, and you're wearing an Indian outfit.
Yes, churidar kameez.
Churidar kameez. Okay,
Yes.
we have a map of India there. Tell us, you got married when?
In 1962, and we moved to India in 1965. I was 18 when I got married. And
18.
18, and 21 when we moved to India.
Okay, so we have a map of India there. So you went from Seattle?
Yes, we went from Seattle. We traveled through Europe, and then we landed in Mumbai. Today it's called Mumbai.
Bombay then?
Bombay it was called then. And from Bombay, then we took a flight and went to Bangalore, which today is called Bengaluru. And that's where my husband's family is, and that's where he's from. So we spent initially 3 weeks in Bangalore so I could meet his family, a very large family.
How many people came to the airport to meet you?
Well over 100 people. And
100 people? That's a tiny airport in Bangalore.
yes, he thought some dignitary was on the plane until the plane taxied close to the building. And then he turns to me and says, "You know, I hate to tell you this, but that's my family."
And that's you in your sari.
Yes, that was taken actually a couple of days ago. I went to a Navaratri celebration where they display dolls for 9 days, and then the 10th day is called Dasara. So one of our friends, she has this event every year, so we always go.
Yeah, it's Golu, and it's Dashera time now. And then there's Mehendi.
Yes.
We have pictures of Mehendi.
Yes.
You've become so Indian that now you can do Mehendi. Is that it?
Yes, I do Mehendi for friends, and this was actually done for a wedding of my husband's niece. I did her Mehendi as well as a couple of other people, and ended up doing 25 people.
So where do you get those patterns from?
The patterns, I make up some of them. I go online and I look at other patterns to get ideas, because each person's hand is a different shape and size, so not all patterns will fit on everybody's hand. And most of the time I find people are more willing to let the artist kind of do their own thing. So the design kind of grows as I do it.
So let's get that map of India back again, because I'd like us to figure out how you went from Seattle. When you went on your first trip to India, you went from Seattle to Mumbai.
Mumbai, correct.
Then from Mumbai, you took a train and went to Bangalore. Bengaluru now.
Actually, we flew from Bombay to
Okay.
Bangalore the
Oh, you
first
flew.
time.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And then from Bangalore, we took a train back to Bombay to clear all of our luggage, which came by ship from the States. It took 2 months. And we spent 2 weeks in Mumbai with some my father-in-law's friends. And then once we cleared customs, we took everything out of the crate and loaded it into the rear of the train and took a train to Kanpur, which is where we were living.
And that's the house that you ended up living.
Yes, and those are my 2 sons, all grown up now.
Then they were tiny tots.
Well, actually, at that time, only Pradeep, my oldest son, was 2 years old, and the other 2 were not yet born.
Okay, and so that's the IIT campus, the Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur.
Correct.
Where your husband ended up teaching.
Correct.
In the chemistry department?
He was a chemical engineer. He still is a chemical engineer. And so he was a professor there for 5 years. And it was during the initial 10-year startup of the IIT Kanpur institution, which was set up by a consortium of 9 American universities through the PL 480 and USAID program.
The PL 480 was the food aid when
Correct.
America gave wheat to...
Correct.
When there was starvation, famine.
Famine,
In the
exactly
60s.
correct. So all of the rupees that would have been paid back to the U.S., which they didn't really have any use for, that was put into a fund that the USAID then helped to establish with the 9 American universities, establish IIT Kanpur, so that money could be plowed
And you
back.
have a book of the IIT, India's intellectual treasures.
Yes. Well, at the time when we went there, there were only 5 IITs. Now I believe there's almost 15.
Yeah, there are lots.
Yeah.
And so this is, if we can get a shot of this is Kanpur. MIT leads an Indo-American program, and that's Kanpur there, you know. So, and that's the gate, which I have seen pictures of. My husband went to IIT Kanpur.
Ah,
so
okay, yes.
So I've heard stories about it.
Right.
So this was one of the IITs that had a lot of American influence or American help.
That's correct. It was solely under American auspices. So what that meant was, for the first 10 years, from 1960 to 1970, American professors and their families would stay either for 18 months or 2 years on the campus to help establish the library, the labs, the departments, the curriculum, and also help in recruiting back the people who had gone to the U.S. from India for studies to return the brain drain back to India. They were recruiting young professors to come and teach at Kanpur, and that's how my husband got recruited and how we ended up there, and it was great.
So I guess some of us may be surprised that there was such a strong American influence in the heartland of India in this institution, where Americans made these regular journeys and stayed for 18 months. In your husband's case and your case, you stayed there for 5 years?
Yes, we were there for 5 years.
Okay. So when you went to India, you were 21. And I think when we spoke a while back, you said your husband was 21 and he went from India to the US in a ship.
Yes, that's correct.
And then for the first time, he flew back?
Yes.
Was that his first jet plane trip?
Well, I think he had flown before, but it was his first journey back to India after he arrived in the States. So he was gone for 9 years without visiting, because in 1956 is when he went to India. So those days travel was, not as easy as it is nowadays, and it was a lot more expensive. And he was a graduate student doing his master's at Washington State and then PhD at University of Washington, which is where we met.
So when you went, we have a book here. This is a well-thumbed copy of a book, and you were reminded of the book because you saw a program we had done about Americans in India.
Correct.
And what was it about that program that jogged your memory?
Well, you were interviewing Deidre, who had gone to the Woodstock School, and it was in Landour, Missouri, which is in the northern hills of Uttar Pradesh, which is the state in which Kanpur resides. And the missionaries in Landour put together a cookbook to help people who come from outside understand, how to get ingredients, what the names are, what is the conversion from grams to teaspoons, how do you bake a cake in a box that doesn't have any calibration on it and not burn it or have it not cook. So it's called the Landour Cookbook. So when I heard, her talk about Landour, it's like, oh yeah, that was my survival Bible initially, just to even help me purchase things in the shops, because I didn't really know the language at first. I learned to speak pretty fluent Hindi and some of my husband's language, but this cookbook was, it was really almost my Bible, and as you can see, it's falling apart. And they didn't use acid-free paper, so I'm sure it's going to disintegrate at some point in time.
And you have here French bread, Mabel Klein's rolls,
right.
Oatmeal bread. Did you get oatmeal in those days?
I never tried to get oatmeal. I actually focused on cooking Indian food more than I did Western food, because I didn't really know how to cook too much as a new bride, and so I really learned how to cook in India from my mother-in-law. So I was busy cooking Indian food, but it was helpful for me to even learn the names and the amounts, equivalents. But
so there was an Essex Farms then. I didn't know Essex Farms existed then.
It must have been in the Missouri area because it wasn't in the Kanpur area. So a lot of the ads that you see there were from the Missouri Landour area, not in Kanpur.
So the foothills of the Himalayas.
Correct.
And these were all mostly American missionaries.
Yeah,
and
I think so.
Yeah, because Woodstock is the oldest American school. And so this is the book. How did you find out about this book?
There was an American family that was there. Well, there were several, and one of them lived on our street, and so she came to welcome me, and then she actually told me about the cookbook and helped me actually purchase a copy, because I think they got several copies and they were stashing them for anybody who wanted to buy them. So I lucked out and I got one.
And that saved you, and that's how your husband found out how to shop.
Sort of. There weren't any shops actually on the IIT campus, which is about 10 miles outside of Kanpur city. So my husband and one of his colleagues, his wife and I would give lists of groceries, and they would take either a cycle rickshaw into the city, or sometimes they could get an auto rickshaw, and then they would go shopping, have dinner, and then they would come back with all the ingredients, sometimes not exactly the right ones.
So we have some more pictures, and you were 18. What did you know about India before you met your husband?
I actually knew very little about India, except that I was always very interested in...
Why?
Well, my father came from Norway, and I grew up, my parents were divorced when I was very young. I think I was a year and a half old. But I don't know, I was always drawn to different parts of the world. I'm an artist, and so I was drawn to a lot of the art and things like that. And so through the art, I became interested in different countries. And, you know, in 1960, 62, nobody in the US really knew a whole lot about India. And many people told me when I was getting married, oh, you should read books on India. And I thought, you know, I don't think I want to do that, because I want, when I go to India, I want to experience it for myself and not through somebody else's eyes, because going there as a wife, my experience is going to be very different than someone who goes there as a traveler or a tourist. And so I didn't really know much about India, but I did ask our friends, you know, about some of the, you know, the day-to-day things that might be helpful for me to know.
Were there a lot of Indian students in Seattle at that time, in the 60s?
There was a good number. The interesting thing is during that time there were students from all over India. So there was an Indian Students Association. Now you find there's so many people from different parts of India that they have their own associations.
Regional associations.
Exactly, okay. Exactly. So it was very cosmopolitan, and my husband was president of the Indian Students Association for a while. So. And
that's how you got to meet the Prime Minister of India.
Yes, actually, Indira Gandhi had come.
And you have a photo of that.
I have a photo. So my husband was also captain of the Seattle Cricket Club, and there was a party going on when Mrs. Gandhi had come with her son Rajiv, who at that time was 18. And my husband, his name is Vasu, he convinced Mrs. Gandhi to allow him to come to the party. So we weren't married at that time. So I actually had a date with Rajiv Gandhi.
So that's you?
That's me and Rajiv Gandhi.
And both of you were 18?
Yes, we were both 18.
Okay, a rare picture.
Yes, a very rare picture.
And then we have a picture of you and your mom?
Yes, so this is the day that I got married. The sari that I'm wearing, my mother-in-law and father-in-law had sent from India by ship, so it had taken about 2 months. And then this is a picture of my husband and I at the ceremony.
What kind of ceremony? You are Jewish?
Yes.
So did you get your rabbi to marry you?
I tried my hardest, but he just couldn't do it. He said, you know, it's against his principles, which I totally understood. So we had a Justice of the Peace ceremony, and there were like 5 people there. And my husband was a graduate student, so he couldn't afford too much, but it's lasted 52 years. We got remarried when he turned 60 in the traditional South Indian puja ceremony. And so we actually...
Where, in India or here?
No, here in the Livermore Temple.
Oh, okay.
And so we actually had another wedding ceremony, which is part of the
Hindu tradition.
The Hindu tradition, right.
Okay. Especially the South Indian.
Yes.
Okay. And then that's the picture of your mother-in-law.
Yeah, my mother-in-law and father-in-law. This is in front of their house in Bangalore.
Which is now famous for, it's the Silicon Valley of India.
Exactly. In those days, it was a very quiet place and very nice place.
It still is a quiet and nice place, in some ways.
In some ways, it's very, very busy. The traffic is horrendous, but I still love to go there. I'm going again in December. I'm going for a month, actually.
Every year you make the trip?
No, not every year. The last time I went was 2011 when my husband was made a fellow of the IIT Kanpur Institute. He was fifth to receive that award. So 2 of my sons and myself went to receive it on his behalf.
Okay.
So
now there's that plate staring at me, and lovely, you know, there's this lovely smell wafting, and it's been tickling my nostrils. I know what this is, but do you want to explain what this is? And you made it?
Yes, I made it. So this
you put me to shame.
These are what I call mini masala dosas. So a masala dosa, a dosa, first of all, is like a crepe that's made from a blend of rice and a white lentil called urad dal. And it's fermented overnight, and then you make a crepe out of it. And
no eggs?
No, there's no eggs. It's all vegetarian. It's pure vegetarian. And then inside, you make a dry potato curry, and then you stuff it inside and you roll it up. So that's called the masala that goes
like
inside.
Country potatoes, but Indian style.
Indian style, exactly correct. And so, you know, if you go to the Indian restaurants, you see these ginormous, you know, dosas, and nobody can eat those. They're too big. Well, a lot of people do eat them, and they're delicious. But I was having a party, and people usually make samosas, and I didn't want to make samosas, which are a pastry stuffed with potatoes, and they're pretty big and they're so filling.
They're like the Indian apple turnovers.
Yes, exactly, except with potatoes. So I decided to try to make little tiny crepes and stuff it with the masala, and so that's what I've done. And now anytime I go to somebody's house and ask what can I bring, and they said, why are you even asking?
So you've become synonymous with that?
Yes.
Okay. But what was fascinating when I was talking to you is how Indian your kitchen is. Is there any American food that you cook at all?
Yes, but I have to get out my recipe books.
Really?
Yeah, I basically cook mostly Indian food.
You don't have a craving for macaroni and cheese or a hamburger?
Well, sometimes we do, but I mean, I would say we're probably about 90% vegetarian just because, and then I make chicken curry, and sometimes I make pasta, and I make chicken cacciatore and things like that. But typically I make Indian food for dinner, and weekends also for breakfast. I'll make upma or, you know, dosas, idlis, traditional stuff.
So when you look back at your life, what are some of the things that you're surprised at, that you have done, that you didn't think you would have been capable of achieving or doing?
Well, there's one short story that I'll relate. We had been living in Kanpur for a couple of years, and
in the 60s.
In the 60s, and that was they just had the Indo-Pakistan War in 1965. Our neighbor's brother.
You had just landed then.
Yes. So our neighbor's brother was in the army, and he was wounded, so he came to stay with his brother, who was just right next door to us. And they decided that we were all going to go on a picnic. And so his brother's wife, their 2 sons, and our neighbor, who wasn't married at that time, and his mother, myself, my husband, and my son Pradeep. There was 1 scooter and 1 motorcycle.
All of you?
So we did it in shifts, and I was sitting on the back of a scooter with our neighbor's brother driving, his kids standing in front, my son sitting on my lap. We're flying down this dirt road, and I'm thinking to myself, 5 years ago, who would have thought that I'd be on the back of a scooter on this road in India going for a picnic on the Ganges River.
I think it's known as pillion rider, right?
Yes.
And it's very common even today in India.
Yes, it is.
A family of 4
yes.
on a scooter, sometimes 5.
Exactly.
You know?
I have lots of pictures of those when I was back there in 2011. I saw many families like that, on bicycles also.
Bicycles. So you, when did you finally leave India?
We were there from 1965 to 1978. So after staying 5 years...
So you saw the emergency period?
Yes. We also saw...
Which is Mrs. Gandhi she imposed emergency and I think civil.
Yeah, civil liberties were actually suspended, and that was one of the deciding factors that encouraged us to come back here. But when we moved after 5 years in Kanpur, we moved to Bombay, which is now called Mumbai, or Mumbai. That was when the Indo-Pakistan war that created Bangladesh happened. So we had anti-aircraft firing and, you know, paper on the windows and all of that. So I was there for both of those wars. It was quite interesting.
65 and the
1971
yeah, war.
Okay. Exactly.
And then you came back in 78.
Yes.
And you've been in the Bay Area since then.
We came back to Washington State first. My husband was president of a startup company, and then after 4 years we moved to the Bay Area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever get to watch what we today call Bollywood films when you were in India? Because that must have come as a shock to you in 65.
Yes, I saw many Bollywood movies, and in fact...
I want to say get out of here. You really did in
yes.
65, in the 60s?
My very first movie that I saw was in IIT Kanpur Lecture Hall L7, and the movie was called Wo Kaun Thi.
Oh, who was she?
Yeah, who is she? And I still remember the song Naina Barse from that movie is one of my favorite Hindi songs.
It's a very, it's got a melancholic tinge
yeah,
to it.
it's a very, very
Oh, so you got hooked into Hindi cinema.
Well, I won't say hooked, but yes, I enjoy it. And so I don't act in Hindi cinemas, but I act in Kannada dramas.
Which is the
South Indian language of Bangalore. I act in dramas as well as 2 Kannada movies I've acted in.
And your Kannada is good enough for you to be on stage?
Yes, so I mug up the words.
Nobody uses mug up.
Okay.
That's such an Indian phrase. Mug up, don't you think so?
Yes, it is.
You know, by heart, mug up, those
Right.
are Indian. I don't know, what is the American equivalent of that?
Memorize.
Memorize. See,
Yeah.
even I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Okay, mug up is such an Indian phrase.
Right. So I don't read or write Kannada, but my pronunciation is not bad. So I sit with the director, and she goes through, you know, the lines with me, and then she will actually record it for me so that I can take it home and play it and listen to it, and then I learn it and make sure I have the right pronunciation.
So in many ways, you've become very Indian then.
Yeah,
You know,
very much so.
You speak 2 languages.
Yes.
You know, and you shake your head.
Well, I was 21 when I went to India and 34 when I came back. So I would say my adult development actually occurred in India. So I'm very much both.
So do you go and become friends with your neighbors? Because that's a very Indian thing when you're in India. You
Absolutely.
know? The neighbors just kind of embrace you.
Yeah, they just show up.
And they'll borrow a cup of sugar. Or
Yeah, and I mean, that aspect of the Indian culture I thoroughly enjoy, and I really relish it both here and in India. So it was very, very nice.
Did you miss your American culture at all when you were there?
Not really, because when we lived on the campus in IIT, it was like its own community. It was
like a college campus.
Yeah, it was a self-contained community. Not just the college students were residential, but the faculty was also residential. So the majority of them actually lived on the campus. So we created our own activities. We had a faculty wives club. We'd every week meet in somebody's house and, you know, do cooking, and we just had a lot of different things. And so it was a good transition, I think, from here to there, where I wasn't living in the middle of a city, perhaps. But then every summer we would spend 2 months in Bangalore, so we would take the train, which was 2.5 days journey from Kanpur to Bangalore.
Did you go second class, first class? Or?
Every other year we went first class, and every other year we went third class reserved.
Okay. To tell folks what is third class reserved.
Well,
these are all very quaint Indian terms
Yes.
that you will find out when you're traveling by train.
So third class reserved is no longer there, but what it
second
meant,
class.
Yeah, what it meant was you had, you know, a berth and then a seat, and you shared it with a lot of people. And at night, you had a reserved bed, so there were like 3 tiers. And then in the daytime, those beds went up, and everybody sat together, and you shared your food, and you shared everything. And it was, by the time you got to Bangalore, you know, they were your best friends, and probably you could even find out that they were related to you somehow.
So you must have drawn a lot of curious stares because there weren't many Americans traveling to India in the 60s.
Yeah.
A lot of Europeans, but not Americans. Did they have a problem understanding you when you spoke in English, because you do have an accent?
Yes, I do have an accent.
So do I.
But I think what I do instinctively is I try to speak in a manner that will help the person who's listening understand what it is I'm trying to say. So it doesn't mean I mimic, but I try to use language, not speaking down to people, but I listen carefully to what they say and how they say it, and then I try to respond in a manner in which they will understand. And I just do that instinctively. I think I've always done that.
And what language did you speak with your in-laws? Because you mentioned how your mother-in-law, when she found out that you were coming, she went and got eggs. When she's a pure vegetarian, as pure is a term used big time in the South.
Exactly. So I had no expectation of any sort of eggs or meat because my husband had told me they were vegetarians. So my mother-in-law, she had gone to a convent school, so she knew some English. And so she could understand some of the things that I said. And then over the course of time, I learned some Kannada. So she could speak to me in Kannada and I would understand and reply either in Kannada or English. So we managed pretty well. And the rest of my husband's family, they all speak very good English. He's the eldest of 7.
Okay.
So,
so my final question. If I came to your house for lunch or dinner, what would I expect? Because you have such an Indian kitchen. I'm curious.
Well, so for lunch or dinner, either one, I would probably give you some rice, some sambar, and maybe some raita, which is yogurt salad type of thing, and maybe one side bhaji or goju, which is sort of a vegetable dish with some ground up spices. I mean, I don't know how to explain it without going into detail, but so
it's like a salad with lentils in it.
Goju? No, it's ground up coconut and spices with vegetables. So it's kind of like a wet vegetable, if you will. But it's very tasty.
And then would there be any dessert?
Well, typically in an Indian household, there isn't dessert. Desserts are usually for special occasions. So we eat fruit if we want to have something sweet. So.
Karen, it looks like you've led a full life and you've mastered. You've put me to shame with your
Oh, come on. I'm sure you can cook very well too.
Well, in a manner of speaking, yes, I can. I think, because you all learn to cook. So,
sure.
So thank you so much for stopping by and talking about this book, the book that saved your life in the kitchen. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Initially. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching. If you missed any of our interviews, you can go to YouTube and look up our channel, and all our interviews are there. We'll be back again next week with another edition. Until then, goodbye and thank you for watching.